I thought this was a really cool thought. It was a pleasure meeting you, George. I feel like I learned a lot, so that was really cool. And
Yeah,
I
it was nice
appreciate
meeting you.
I appreciate it especially because like I'm applying for a job in China, so I might move. It's up
Oh,
in the air still.
what city? Because I'm going to be moving to China maybe next year.
Oh, Nanjing.
Oh, Nanjing. Okay, that's. I'll be like 2 hours from you on the bullet train.
Yeah,
I
it's
think the
like
bullet train.
because
Yeah,
it's supposed to be 2 hours like from Shanghai.
yeah. Oh, if I move, I'm gonna be moving to Chengdu in Sichuan. But then.
Oh,
I go,
okay.
Yeah, but it's really convenient. Like I probably visit you and stuff.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It's up in the air, but I think I might get it because like I've been talking to like the faculty there, and they seem to like me, and they're helping me with like an application for a postdoc. So I feel like I might get it.
Is it Oh, what industry is it? Like teaching?
Oh yeah, it's at Nanjing University.
Oh, Nanjing University. Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah.
There's actually or where's your family from? Like what country?
My family, like basically the Mexico borderlands.
Okay.
Because like they're from like both sides, like Texas,
so Mexican,
and then
or,
yeah. So but
okay.
like Texas and like also like northern Mexico.
What's interesting in Shanghai, there's actually like a small like Mexican town where there's like a bunch,
oh really?
Like a good, but it's really small. But there's like a lot of like Mexican food. But the Mexican food in China is like luxury food. There's no like stands and stuff. I think it's because like like you have to take a plane to get all the way across. Yeah. So yeah, like a lot of the Mexicans in China, they open like, and it's more rare. So a lot of the Mexican food is fine dining.
I see.
Yeah,
that's interesting. That's cool.
It's really interesting because I remember when I was 19, I was there, and then I was at a Mexican restaurant. I just like craved tacos really badly when I was in Shanghai, and then we went to this restaurant, and then there was a Mexican waitress. She was taking my order in Chinese, and then her Chinese was better than mine, and then and she was also really cute, and I was just like such a trip for me, like I wasn't used to it. It was really cool. It was a really cool experience.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. It's funny how international food is different in like the other country, and especially with Mexican food. Like my experience, oddly, is that like Mexican food is actually worse in other Latin American countries than in like the US even, because I don't know why. Like I have family in Panama, so sometimes I go to Panama, and Panama has like the worst Mexican food I've ever had. Like it doesn't has no flavor, and it's because they can't eat spicy food because they don't eat spicy food over there.
Oh, are there Mexicans in Panama? Could it be that there's not enough Mexicans there?
Yeah, well, yeah. There's probably like almost not. There's probably some, but yeah, it's not a big presence. And then the food is like I guess very different because it's more Caribbean, and they don't really eat like hot. They don't eat spicy stuff.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, no, I could imagine like China would actually have like better Mexican food because like they're more used to like spicy stuff.
Oh, well, it wasn't as good as here, but it was just like fine dining. But like the food wasn't it wasn't as good. Well, I mean, I've only tried two Mexican restaurants in China, but those two weren't as good as what you'd find here. Yeah, what I mainly wanted to just talk about, get the idea I wanted to get out in the podcast. Like, even if someone opposes China, which is fine. Like after this podcast, I'm totally fine with a viewer disliking China, whatever. But I just want more people to be open to the idea of commune capitalism, because I think it brings a lot of benefits, that we're gonna see over the next century.
I agree with that too. I mean, I voted for Bernie for kind of that reason, Medicare for all and all of that. But I don't know. Maybe democracy isn't what maybe democracy is failing us in that regard.
Yeah, just there has to be some way to keep the corporations out of the government.
Yeah, I've only recently like realized that as an issue. In terms of like corporations being able to really take advantage of like a very democratic system where you like people get elected kind of based on popularity contests basically, and not so much based on like their actual merits. So yeah, I've only recently kind of realized that as a problem of the way like we do things here.
Yeah. This is also another interesting point that I forgot to talk about earlier. So I noticed two different mindsets towards AI. There's one mindset in America and one in China. Like the mindset in America generally behind AI is kind of like fear, because people feel like AI and robots, automation will just make people lose jobs. But in China, the people are very embracing of AI and automation because they think it'll make jobs easier for the people. So like the dream, for example, Jack Ma's dream is to have all Alibaba employees only work 4 hours a day and then just focus purely on innovation, because AI and automation takes care of the rest. But I understand why there's a fundamental difference between the way America reacts to AI versus the way Chinese workers react to AI. And it's because China's government is all about the worker. You know, that's what communism is. It's about the worker. But in America, if AI or automation gets really developed, it will make people lose jobs, because this like democratic capitalist system is not in favor of the worker. So it's interesting. There's two very different mindsets on AI.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it sounds like there's more job security in China.
Yeah. Well, there's also a lot of competition, but there's more. Yeah, there's more business and job opportunities.
I wonder if Americans' fear of AI also has to do with the Terminator or all these like robot movies.
Oh no, you know, honestly, I think a lot of it does, because you know when people, there's like this myth that like, because you know I didn't learn about until I started learning how to program games. But what I realized is there was always this fear that like, don't connect AI to the internet, because then it'll like be able to hack whatever and the AI can go rogue. But that is, a lot of it's science fiction. Like AI can't deviate from the code. So an AI taking over the world and screwing us all over would have to be the result of someone accidentally misprogramming and writing a typo. Not the AI. The AI can't evolve. Like it doesn't have babies. It doesn't replicate, and there's no genes that change. It doesn't evolve. It just does whatever the code is. If it were ever to take over the human race, it would be because someone misprogrammed something, not because they evolved. They can't. The AI cannot evolve like that. But so many people believe it, you know, like because of movies. Yeah.
If you do get the job, Carlos, do you know when you might be moving?
No, not yet. The school session starts in September, but I'm not getting my diploma. Oh, by the way, I'm defending. Like,
oh, nice.
Probably I'll be defending on like the 14th or something.
Is it public?
Yeah, it'll be Zoom, so I'll invite people.
Yeah, let me know. I'll be down to support. I don't know if I'm allowed to say things or not.
yeah, people are, but like not till like after. But,
yeah.
But yeah, it'll be like the 14th or the 13th or something like that. And I won't get my diploma until August, so I'm not sure if I would be moving right after that. But we'll see. I don't know. I shouldn't also. I don't like thinking about it too much, because I like thinking about it because it's exciting. Like I would like to like live in China for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But then like it's not a guarantee.
A funny thing my dad told me before is like, because you know like China monitors like Chinese apps, right? Like WeChat, and then America monitors American apps like Facebook, whatever. So he said like, if you're gonna talk shit about China, talk shit on Facebook. If you're gonna talk shit about America, talk shit on WeChat. so they can't monitor it.
One thing I did want to add on comment, like despite whatever news we're getting about like oppression of minorities in China or whatever, like from the beginning I've thought though that minorities in China like are treated better than they have been in the US for sure. Like they do get what is it, like
affirmative action?
Like there was affirmative action.
The government implemented it. Like the minorities didn't have to fight for it. The government self-implemented it. Right. And then actually like a lot of, I mean, this might not affect everybody because this is you know, becoming a star benefits not that many people, but like TV shows or whatever, things that have to do with PR, a lot of them specifically try to look for minorities so that they could like exotic the companies. So a lot of times minorities can use that as an advantage to get jobs. I mean, singing competitions, you know, for those singing reality TV shows, like so many of the contestants are Tibetans because there's like this this kind of like stereotype that Tibetans are like the best singers ever, like because this belief that like oh, Tibetans, they sing across the mountains to each other and stuff. So a lot of Han Chinese people believe that Tibetans are like really good at singing. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and then they were exempt from the one child policy.
Yeah, they were exempt from that.
Right, and then then they also have like a ton of land. Like Tibet's huge. That like native reservations in the U.S. pale in comparison. Yeah. So
yeah, I feel like in America, when there's like Native American land or whatever areas for minorities, America doesn't really put effort to keep those areas safe. But China puts an effort to keep those areas safe. But at the same time, it could be seen as a negative because then China will be more involved. So that could be seen as a negative too. But I think China tries to make them, if anything, I guess China tries to make them assimilate more. But the thing is, China also like tries to give them more of the same privileges that Hans get.
Yeah. Well, I would say all of that happened on native reservations too, and in a much more sloppy manner, especially with boarding schools, the policing by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. All of that stuff happened, and it was all like slipshod. It was all like very slipshod. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe China is a bit more efficient. Yeah. I just know those things have been done here too, and yeah, it's like shitty. People complain about it all the time. So,
this is like has nothing to do with China, but like I don't know if you know. Have you ever like researched about Singapore? Because their public housing system is like crazy. They subsidize 80% of the housing in their country, and then like poor, middle class or rich, they subsidize all of it. And then they do it's really interesting. I think Singapore has the best benefits, regardless if you're capitalist or if you're communist, because they do a little bit of both. They're like somewhat democratic, somewhat autocratic. Like they don't have freedom of speech, but they have public elections. So the maximum income tax rate in Singapore is 8%. So if you're a capitalist, you'll love that. But all education is free, universal healthcare, 80% of all housing is subsidized. Like if you're a socialist, you'll like it too. Like but the only problem is it's just too small. Like I think the whole country is not even as big as LA County. So
I see.
Yeah, that's the only thing. You'd get to the border within a day if you were touring. What's interesting is I would see a big shift because when I was a kid and I would meet like older people who were going through college, they were international students. More of them would consider staying in America. But then when I started going to college, as I got older, of all my friends that came from China, only like one of them stayed because China's life, standard of living is surpassing America's. And then, what you see in Singapore with Singaporeans is when they come here, none of them stay. Not a single Singaporean friend I have stayed in America. Like no one even considers leaving Singapore. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I know like I had some Japanese friends in university too, and then they also, like none of them stayed too. They all went back because just there's a big shift, I think right now, like a global shift in kind of like power or standard of living. A lot of other countries are starting to surpass America.
I think I do have one friend. He's like half Mexican, half Singaporean, and I think he was born in Singapore because he's not a close. He's more of a friend of a friend, but I think he's in the U.S. because he's like avoiding the military. I forget what it's called.
They have mandatory service for the Army Reserves because Singapore their biggest enemy is Malaysia. So then like Singapore has a mandatory kind of like training of 2 years, and then so that all the males have to be on reserve in case there's a war with Malaysia.
I see.
And then they're really similar to Switzerland. Switzerland's kind of like that. They have, but then those Singapore and Switzerland, they never invade other countries. They just build a really strong economy, and then they essentially they turtle, and then they build like strong defenses. And it's pretty efficient because they never have to worry about invading other people.
And then what you were saying about like Singapore, how like there's not really like any immigrants from Singapore. The same is true for Panama.
Oh, really?
Actually, yeah. Like when I visit, I really enjoy Panama. Like I just have a good time, and it's just like it's really relaxing and very chill, and like people there seem really happy. And I can see why, because of the things the government does, like for the people there.
And, what is their government like?
Their government is, I mean, all the money comes from, I don't know like how taxes work. I know like a lot of stuff's very cheap. A lot of stuff produced in the country is very cheap. They do import a lot of things, and those are more expensive. But the government does have a lot of money from the canal, so they're able to provide stuff like I remember there was one year, some of my little cousins, they got free computers for like school.
Nice.
And like, yeah, so that was like really good. And then, yeah, like my cousins, like there was this one time they actually came to the US to visit. Like we were trying to get them like passports, and we got them like some passports so they could come. And then they came, and like they liked meeting the family, but then they were like, Panama's better. So they just went back and like, you know, whatever.
That's what all my friends in China, like my sister, she got married early this year. And then her wife is, my sister, she grew up in Guangzhou in China. And then her wife also grew up there. So they got married here. And then my sister and her are living here right now because my sister has a job here in San Francisco. Every day they just keep complaining. They're like, oh, I want to go back like to China. But then like my sister doesn't want to give up that job. But every day they're just like, man, like more like, oh, they got like flicked off by people when they were wearing masks. Because they're, you know, they're Asian and they're wearing masks. So they got flicked off while they're driving while wearing masks and stuff. And they're just like, man, the infrastructure here sucks. The healthcare sucks. Like people here are racist towards us. Like, I just want to go back so badly. But yeah, a lot of people from a lot of countries, I think now, are starting to feel that way about the US.
Yeah, no, I went to New Zealand a couple years ago.
Oh, New Zealand's
and
nice.
And I met this woman who was from there, and she was telling me how, like, we were talking about places we had been to like traveling, and she told me how she hated going to the US because like I guess she got like when she went through TSA, she got patted down, and like compared to other countries she'd traveled through, the like security was just like very aggressive, like unusually aggressive, like with her. And so that like changed her mind about ever going back to the US.
Oh, I have something really funny to tell you guys about security in China. So this is how security in China works, and this is where I could see why Westerners would say China doesn't care about human rights. So when you go to the bullet train station, if you're holding a bottle of water, they don't make you throw it away. They make you take a sip, and then if nothing happens to you, you get to keep the water, essentially. But if you like choke on the spot, you know, and it's poisoned, it's obvious, then you know you'll get arrested. But yeah, they actually let you keep your water if you take a sip of it. So it's really interesting, like, because it will only affect you if you're trying to bomb or like, you know, poison people. If you're just a normal person, like, you know, like I got to keep my water all the time and not have to buy a new one and stuff. So it's really interesting. It's really different. But I just thought it was hilarious when I did it. Like she just told me to take a sip. I was like, what the hell does this have to do with anything? And after I did it, I was like, hey, wait, I get to keep my water. Okay. It was like the funniest experience, my first time ever. Yeah. It was so funny.
It's actually more efficient, so you're not wasting water.
Yeah, like I was so happy I got to keep my water. But when I thought about it, I was like, damn, like if I was really trying to like do something, I would have just died in front of them. I was like, oh damn. Yeah, I think a main difference you'll see between China and US, like not talking about anything political, like a main difference is like China is more collective and America is more individual. So for example, the way that they handle drug trafficking is very different. Like, and this is true for a lot of Asian countries, not just China, because I know Japan, Singapore, and South Korea also execute drug dealers. Well, they have the like in China, the government has the right to execute drug dealers if they carry like above a certain amount of drugs. Like it has to be a certain amount. But in America, like America doesn't execute all the drug dealers. But in China, it's very collective. So like China's not willing to worry about one person's individual rights if it means it's going to have to sacrifice the whole population. So China's willing to execute an individual drug dealer if it means that people are less willing to smuggle in drugs into China. Because China doesn't have a drug problem at all. There's like zero drugs. Yeah. The streets are so safe. Like it's just ridiculously safe. Like you see women walking home at like 3 a.m. by themselves. Just not even, like nobody checks left and right when they're in China. Everyone just is on their phone and just walks straight. It's so safe there. But yeah, like that's a different like part of the culture. But in America, you know, they'll go farther to protect like an individual if they're a drug dealer or something like. So that's a key difference you'll see. Like China really cares about the collective and doesn't care as much about the individual as America does.
That's really interesting. That's totally a big difference, because I think the U.S. and also even like Latin America, they're in the direction to like legalizing everything. There's an article recently that basically talked about how the Mexican president is trying to get everything legalized now, and wants to work with the U.S. to legalize stuff more, because that's kind of affecting the drug war.
Yeah, so like
right?
they're gonna decriminalize like some of the stuff that the cartel does, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that could be good, right? What do you think of that?
My initial opinion was that it would be good, because then cartels, then it would like weaken like cartels. But I don't know. Like I could also see how like making like hyper criminalizing things like in the way that these Asian countries do, like also has like benefits.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think China has a big misunderstanding with drugs because they consider, you know, weed the same thing as opium. Like it's on the same level of like how it's as illegal as opium. I understand why China's so against drugs, because when the British tried to colonize, you know, they couldn't get China to open up and trade, so they smuggled in opium, and then it just ruined Canton, like a whole province. So like that's why, and it happened in Japan too. That's why Japan, you know, same thing. And in Singapore, like they all hate drugs for that reason. But I mean, yeah, weed is not the same as heroin. Yeah. It's nowhere near as extreme as that. But yeah, because from what I hear people say, like in China, they say some of my friends, they've been caught smoking weed or having weed, and then they say like if you get caught having the drug as a consumer, they say it's not that big of a deal. You just get a fine. Like it's not that serious. But if you get caught as a dealer, then it's really serious. You know, Jackie Chan's son, it was like all the news. He got caught. Like,
oh, really?
No, but I think in the end, like, because he didn't have like a consumer's amount. He had like a dealer's amount, like pounds of marijuana. But the thing is, he had a big party, and then it was like kind of obvious that he was just gonna smoke it. Like he wasn't trying to sell it, so he didn't get executed. Like, but it's pretty light if you just do the drug. But it's more severe if you're trying to sell it. I heard in some countries like Switzerland, if you get caught possessing drugs or doing drugs, you don't get treated as a criminal. You get treated as a patient and admitted into like rehab, and then they treat you more as a sick person rather than as a criminal. I feel like that's really cool. I hope like more countries could do that.
Interesting. Any thoughts, Takashi?
No, this is good. It's a good conversation. Okay. I was just thinking too, because I've been reading the book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. It talks about the incarceration of Black folks.
Oh man!
And how the drug issue, like in the 70s and 80s, like once the war on drugs started to happen, there were far more rates of incarceration of Black people. So even in this country, you know, like you guys were mentioning, there's like, you know, individual protection for maybe certain protection for Black for people who use drugs or deal drugs, but it's really different if you're Black.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, if you're like Black, then the government doesn't really care as much about your.
So there's a huge difference if you're a Black person or a white person, or you're a person of color. You get treated way differently.
Yeah. Well, I think another thing that exacerbates the problem is the private prison system, right?
Yeah,
that's
like
true.
That's a huge problem.
There's people making a profit on locking people up, so there's just more, and there's clearly more incentive to like make arrests, to find reasons to arrest people.
Mm-hmm.
So that you know.
That's a big danger of capitalism, where you allow the prison system to be like privatized. That's one thing that should for sure not be capitalist. Prison system.
Yeah, it's just crazy. The amount of people that's locked up and the amount of Black people. I think I heard it's like 1/3 or 1/4 of Black males will end up in prison. That's a very high statistic.
Yeah, I actually sent Takashi a video about a bunch of Black people who moved from America to Asia, and then all of them, regardless if they're from China, Korea, Singapore, or they moved to Japan, they all say the same thing. They say cops don't stop me here and aren't suspicious of me here. I'm not in danger.
They say like they feel more free.
Yeah, they say they feel more free because they don't have to watch their back. Like cops don't randomly stop them. Like I remember in Shanghai, because Asia has a big population, and then when you get sick, like a cold or anything, it's common courtesy in Asia to wear a mask so you don't spread it to other people. So a lot of people wear masks. So then I was wearing a mask, and then I would sometimes see some black people, like they would have a mask and a hood on and sunglasses, and then they would walk by, and as they're walking around, cops wouldn't be suspicious. They wouldn't stop them. They have no reason to suspect them of anything. But then I just thought, like, man, if that was America, you see a black person walking around like that, dude, the cops would probably like have their knee in his back already, like within 5 seconds.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, but one thing I like is for the Americans who are not alt-right, the American people are more like progressive than a lot of Chinese locals. But so in China, it's kind of different. Like in America, I would say the people are more progressive than the government. In China, I think the government's more progressive than the people. I don't know if you ever heard of dowry culture, but it's a part of Chinese culture that I really don't like. Essentially, for the viewers, it's when a man and woman get married, the man's family has to pay the woman's family money, and it kind of like objectifies the woman, like she's like a product. So the government doesn't like that. It doesn't fit the ideals of communism. So the government next year is banning loans for dowries. So next year you can't get loans for dowries. But a lot of the citizens still want to do that culture, the dowry culture. But the government, so I say the government is more progressive than the people. The government is trying to get rid of that culture. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I would say
that's crazy.
The government is more progressive than the people.
Yeah, that's like the continuation of the Cultural Revolution, basically.
Yeah, it is essentially. Yeah. It is because I saw something really interesting. I was reading some YouTube comments, and then they were talking about how like a lot of countries are removing statues of people who committed like genocide or like were racist and stuff, like Christopher Columbus or whoever. And then they're asking, oh, is that going on in China? And then they said, oh, it already happened during the Cultural Revolution. Like they took down so many statues of so many people. Oh yeah, and then if you do end up going to Nanjing, like, yeah, you'll just see like a whole different side of China, like, because like generally like most people in China they like Mao, like because they know about it, they see the good side, which you don't get to see here, like because in order for Xi Jinping to kind of like almost perfect commune capitalism today, it wouldn't have been possible if Mao wasn't around. Like he did make mistakes, but before his time, China got invaded by multiple empires, and there was a lot of missionaries that killed a lot of Chinese people. And the inequality of land ownership was worse than like anything we see in America or Hong Kong today. So like there's a lot of positive that he did. Like generally the people in China, in mainland China, love Mao. But I think like unanimously, everyone in mainland China, their favorite is probably Deng Xiaoping, the guy that opened China up. Basically, you won't find anybody that dislikes him. Everybody likes him. There's some people that don't like Xi Jinping. Like, I think a lot of business owners that like the 1990s China, because 1990s China was more like unbalanced. It was a lot of servant-master relationship, like kind of like like factory wages were really really low, minimum wage was really really low. So you'd have like really rich people and really really poor people, and there's some people who want to keep that culture around. Those people don't like Xi Jinping, or people who who embezzled money in the government. They hate Xi Jinping because he purged all of them. Like it's interesting because someone I know, they grew up during the old China where you had to bribe people. So during the 1990s or during the 2000s, they would still have to bribe the government officials. But nowadays, they try bribing people and they say it's impossible. Like they say because of Xi Jinping and his purge, like you can't bribe anybody. They like that person knows like the chief of police in certain districts, and that the chief of police in that district can't even ask chief of police in another district what happened with this inmate. Like basically what happened was someone that we knew got arrested in China, and then the person I knew one of the people I knew wanted to get information on what the crime was. So then he asked his a police friend who was chief of police to investigate. The person was arrested in Beijing, so he asked him to ask the Beijing police what was going on, and the Beijing police wouldn't even tell him. So like, yeah, it got like my favorite of all of China's leaders is Xi Jinping for sure. Like that's hands down my favorite. But generally, most people in China, they like Deng Xiaoping the most. Like a lot of some older people don't like Xi Jinping as much. Another thing, if you go to China, you'll have a lot of older people telling you, oh, learn the dialects other than Mandarin. And then you have young people around our age that will say, screw the dialects. Mandarin is the only one that matters. Like, don't learn the dialects. I'm kind of in the second vote. Like, I think I only want, if China, because, China's a civilization state where every province has completely unique culture. Like, the food that you eat in each city you go to is completely different. Like, Sichuan food and Cantonese food is so different. You would think like two different races made the food. But and their dialects, are different. Like, it's the same written system, but it's pronounced completely differently. So they can't understand each other. And then Mandarin is the common tongue. But the reason why I'm okay with dialects disappearing is I do acknowledge that you do lose culture and you lose diversity of the culture, but it unifies Chinese people and it makes it easier to communicate. And also China still has this problem today, but it's always had a problem of cities discriminating other cities. Like, people from Hunan, from that province, have a hard time finding a job in like Shanghai or some other cities in China because there's a bad stigma about Hunan people. And I think without dialects, it's harder to discriminate. If it was everyone speaking Mandarin, it's harder to discriminate. And then it also unifies China more, and it's also easier to communicate too. So yeah, if most older people you meet, they'll tell you to learn dialects, but just in my opinion, don't. our grandpa raised us not to learn dialects, because our grandpa and his kids, they all speak Kunminese, which is a dialect that's very similar to Mandarin but has some variations. And then our parents actually spoke Kunminese to us when we were young, but then he yelled at them. He said, speak Mandarin to them. What are they going to do with Kunminese? Mandarin is where they'll be able to communicate. So then he raised us to speak Mandarin over Kunminese.
No, that makes sense. That's a common attitude among people in other countries. Mexico's the same way. Mexico has that. Yeah, they're not. The thing though is that they're in Mexico. So in Mexico, yeah, everyone speaks the standard language is Spanish, but you do have ethnic minorities who are basically Native Americans. They're just in Mexico.
So do they have different languages or different dialects?
They are languages, but people call them dialects. That's common to call them in Spanish.
But it's a different written system, right? Is it the same written system?
They don't really write them though. So that's the other thing. Yeah.
Because in China, it's all the same writing. Regardless of what dialect, it's all the same written system.
Yeah. But in a lot of these regions where you do have ethnic minorities, people will tell you, oh, don't waste your time with the dialects.
Yeah.
You should learn Spanish and stuff like that. Or people who speak dialects, they should learn Spanish. They should be more assimilated into mainstream Mexican culture. Yeah.
Oh, but isn't Mexico be a little different because right? Because Spain is a foreign entity that came and colonized, wouldn't it? Slightly different because in Mandarin came from China. It didn't come as a foreign entity. So I could see how some Mexicans who speak a dialect wouldn't want to learn. Are there some that don't want to only speak Spanish?
To my knowledge, there isn't really anybody who doesn't want to speak Spanish. But there's still discrimination against people who do speak minority languages.
Oh, I see.
That happens. Yeah. And then I don't know, even though Spanish came from Spain, Mexico, there have been Mexico's a much bigger country than Spain. Yeah. So there's a bigger Spanish speaking population. So in terms of population, it's more of a cultural center, a Spanish speaking cultural power, compared to Spain is. And that was true even 500 years ago. Mexico City has always been a huge city, bigger than any city in Spain too.
So how do you feel about dialects disappearing in Mexico?
It's
good or bad?
I think it's bad, but I mean, because that's what I study. Like that's my research is on minority languages. I think when like you said, like when minority languages or dialects like go extinct, like you lose like diversity, cultural diversity. I think you lose like knowledge too. Like there's knowledge systems that languages or dialects have. I understand the sentiment though of like learning a common language. Like I think that's good too. Like that's definitely important for people to like for people to like compete for jobs and like do well in their life too. I think like there should just be a way to like kind of balance the two, so that you just have like everybody bilingual. Like I think bilingualism is a really good thing too. Like I think there's studies that show like bilingualism like always makes you more intelligent and stuff.
Yeah, there's no disadvantage to being bilingual.
Right. And then I think Singapore, I remember reading a little bit about like Singapore's education. Like everyone there speaks at least
4
like
languages.
3. Yeah, and it's incorporated into like their education. Like you have the Chinese students, everyone has English classes, and then the Chinese students will like take these extra Chinese classes, and then Indians will take like Tamil classes.
Yeah. Malaysians
have their
You know what's really interesting? I find this like really weird. So 80% of Singapore is Han Chinese, but then China is closer to Malaysia in terms of relationship-wise. They're closer to Malaysia than Singapore. Like China and Singapore's relationship is actually not that good. It's interesting how they're closer to Malaysians.
Well, that goes back to another question we were going to ask. Like, what's mainland China's relationship with like the Chinese diaspora? Like, I mean, we've already talked about Hong Kong. We didn't really say much about Taiwan. Yeah. But then there's also Singapore too, which has like a lot of Chinese.
Is diaspora? Is you referring to like 大中华? Are you referring to like the Chinese race? What does diaspora mean?
Diaspora means like people from a country that are like immigrants in somewhere else. Like all the Mexicans here in the U.S. are like Mexican diaspora, basically.
Oh, okay. So that's
because they're not in Mexico. Like they're living in the U.S. They work here. They raise their kids here, but they're like from Mexico. Okay. Basically immigrants.
Yeah. Because
immigrants in like other countries.
In Chinese, there's like 2 ways to look at what it means to be Chinese, and it's I think it's probably the same as what you just said. Like there's 大中华, which refers to the Chinese race, and then there's 中国, which refers to Chinese nationality. I think the average Chinese person in China or outside of China, just anywhere, they think being Chinese means part of 大中华, so the Chinese race. So this is one thing I don't like, because if you're like from a foreign country and you immigrate to China and you become a Chinese citizen, like a lot of those citizens won't consider you Chinese. But in my opinion, I don't see Chinese as the race. I see it as like the nationality. I think that's because like you know, like if I've lived in America my whole life and then someone from Africa already immigrated to China and then like became a citizen, you know, in my eyes that person's more Chinese than I am. But then like, you know, like most Chinese see in terms of 大中华, like the Chinese diaspora, like that's the only way to be Chinese. Wait, does that have to do with your question?
Yeah, no, that's yeah, no, that has to do with my question, because I was wondering about like the relation you were getting at it before, like the relationship between China and like Singapore, and maybe China and like other parts of the world with like a strong like Chinese population, like maybe in Philippines too. And,
I know mainland China is 95% Han Chinese, Taiwan's 98% Han Chinese, Singapore's 80% Han Chinese, Malaysia's 40% Han Chinese, Thailand's 20%. I think the Philippines was like 2%, and then where our grandparents are from, and our moms, Han Chinese were 1% in Laos. You know, yeah, like I said, there's 2 ways of thinking. Like one is that Chinese refers to all of them as long as they're racially Chinese, or that refers to if your nationality is Chinese. But I prefer the view of the nationality meaning you're Chinese, because I feel like that doesn't discriminate against the race. Like you could be another race and then become Chinese. Like you don't have to be ethnically Chinese to be Chinese. I prefer like that. Well, that's how I think more. So yeah, like I said, like immigrants who live in China, people who immigrated to China and live in China, they're more Chinese than I am. They have more of a right to say they're Chinese than I do. Within
why is China's relationship with Singapore strained, even though like it's 80% Chinese?
I don't know. I think it might be because Singapore used to be a British colony, so I don't know if like but I don't know because they don't have freedom of speech there, so it wouldn't be they value freedom of speech. I'm not sure, and I don't know why China's relationship with Malaysia is good. Because I know like China's relationship with Singapore used to be good. Like during World War II, when Japanese invaded China, Singaporeans boycotted Japanese goods, like in support of the Chinese citizens. I don't know why. Like it's not bad, but it's just like it's not as good as China's relationship is with Malaysia. Yeah, the politics of that region is really interesting because like China is best friends with Pakistan, Ukraine, Burma, and stuff. But at the same time, like Russia and Ukraine aren't really homies, but they're both homies with China. Like China's close to both of them. And then China and India are bitter rivals, but then Russia's allies with both of them. So like, China and Indonesia don't like each other, but the Philippines is close to both of them. So it's interesting. I feel like this is good though, because it makes World War less likely. You know, if like the alliances are all like confused. Because like I know like with the border dispute between China and India right now, like Russia's trying to like get them to calm down and mediate it, you know. So it's good that like there's a lot of allies that are like intertwined.
That's interesting. I didn't know Russia was involved in them like calming that down.
Yeah, Russia is seen as like India and China are looking to Russia as like the mediator right now. That border conflict. It was interesting. I don't know. Like when I saw in the news that because the Chinese troops and Indian troops didn't want to have it escalate to war, so they fought with sticks and stones. they didn't use any guns because they didn't want war to break out. But people actually died during the border conflict like 2 weeks ago. But just like, you know, less than 30 people. But then, they fought with sticks and stones. And then you would see in YouTube comments, World War IV already started? You know that joke that World War III, we're going to nuke each other and then we're going to go back to sticks and stones?
Yeah.
So, it's kind of funny. So,
go ahead.
have you ever gone back and seen Mexico, like recently or anything?
I went last year.
You went last year? What city did you go to?
I went to it's called Zacatecas.
Uh-huh.
Are you familiar with Mexico?
Not really, because I've only been to like those touristy areas, but I want to go more into like, I want to see more like local stuff. Like,
yeah.
I've only seen Cancun and Cabo, like touristy areas. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Cancun, I don't know about Cabo, but I know Cancun is good because even though it's very touristy, like there's like the pyramids around there that are very like, you know, really cool to see. So that's kind of nice. But yeah, no, I know I've been to a lot of parts. I actually haven't been to those parts, but I've been to like a lot of local parts. Like I've been to a lot of the parts which have, like I said, like ethnic minorities, like Native Americans. Zacatecas is like more of a colonial city, so it's more like white Mexicans and more like mainstream Mexican culture with like mariachi and stuff like that. And then there's Mexico City, which is really cool. That's probably my favorite place.
I wanted to go see that. And Guadalajara too. I heard Guadalajara is cool too.
Guadalajara is like so Guadalajara is famous, like, so that's like that's like the second most economically like active city, I think, after Mexico City, I think. And they're famous because they're famous for having a lot of like for being like the originators of a lot of the most popular things that are Mexican, like mariachi music.
That's cool.
Mariachi music started in Guadalajara. Also tequila, like all the agave tequila plantations, that's like in that area too.
Oh, nice.
So like that's what that's famous for. What I like most about Mexico though is the like native culture, like ethnic minority culture, and you get more of that in Mexico City actually, because Mexico City was like where the Aztec Empire was, so there's still like a lot of there's still a lot of like Aztec ruins. So,
yeah, I think like the Mexican flag is so cool. Because speaking of Aztecs, you know how it has that eagle with the that's so cool. That's like one of the coolest flags. Like just the story behind that is really cool, I think.
Yeah, it is a cool story. Yeah, it's kind of funny because a lot of people don't really, most Mexicans don't really identify with like that culture really, with like being Aztec or anything. That's really more of a Mexican American thing. If you meet and it has to do with, like I said, like people kind of look down on native people because you know they tend to be like darker skinned and more poor, so they kind of look down on them for not speaking Spanish sometimes. So yeah, so like that there's also like a racial element to that. So people might know that story, but then they won't really like identify it with it that much, actually. Like a lot of Mexicans won't.
It's interesting. I have, like, my best friend, he's like almost 100% like Spanish blood, but he identifies as mestizo. He doesn't like Spain. So he just like identifies fully as mestizo. He just, it's really interesting.
It's interesting. Well, there's a lot of people who are like, they probably are mixed, but they're just light skinned. Yeah. No, Mexico. If you ever get interested in visiting Mexico, like I know a lot about it just because it's like what I research.
I really want to go. Maybe I'll WeChat you when I go to Mexico.
Like so. Yeah, Mexico City's good, and then Oaxaca's good. Oaxaca has the most unique food because Mexico also has regional food. It's not super different, but in Oaxaca, it gets the most different. That's like the biggest difference you'll see. Like they still do a lot of they still eat a lot of native foods there. Like you can get grasshoppers. Like they eat grasshoppers. They eat wasps. They eat, like
Chinese are super familiar. Chinese are super familiar with insects and stuff. And they eat like their food is a lot more like herbal. They eat a lot more like plants and herbs, and their food is less fried. They don't really they don't really eat fried food that much. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And I feel like this could be its own podcast series because there's a lot to talk about with just communism, capitalism, and just China and American propaganda. There's so much that we could talk about.
China's a bigger country than the U.S. in population and in landmass. So like it's totally like more complex.
Yeah, there's something that's really interesting. Like, so the UN defines China as bigger than America, but America defines itself as bigger than China. And then the reason is really funny. So I looked it up. Like, it says, like Wikipedia says, China. If you look at it based on purely land, China's bigger. If you look at it based on water rights too, China's also bigger. But then America looks at its own water rights and doesn't include China's water rights. So it defines itself as bigger than China. It's so funny. It's just so petty to me. Like which one is like slightly bigger? Like who cares? It's so funny.
That is funny. Yeah, because we have the Great Lakes. That's a lot of like surface area, I guess.
But even with water rights, China's still bigger. It's only if you neglect China's water rights and include America's. Like that, all right.
Good.
Yeah, I gotta get back to some work.
Yeah, but thanks for joining us, George. It was good. And thank you, Carlos, for joining.
Thanks, Carlos. It was nice meeting you, man.
It was nice to meet you too, man. Yeah. All right, you guys have a good afternoon.
All right, you too.